go, Jim. He's dead.
Hello and welcome to Improv Autopsy. I'm your host, Stephen Cadwell. If you have any questions or comments about the podcast or suggestions for people I should interview, you can contact me via improvbrain@gmail.com. In this episode, I interview Josh Blubaugh of Richmond, Virginia's Coalition Theater, which you can find at rvacomedy.com. Josh is co-artistic director with Kimberly Nario, whom I hope to interview in the near future. If you're listening to this and it's still March 2025, you can still submit for the Second Best Comedy Festival, which is held at Coalition Theater. You can find the festival at secondbestfest.com. That's the number 2 for secondbestfest.com. If it's past March 2025, you can go and see the festival June 5th through the 7th in Richmond. And if it's any other year, you can do some internet searches to see when the current festival deadline is and show dates. Richmond is a great city. You won't regret a visit. Regardless of when you're listening, thank you. And please enjoy Josh Blubaugh's Improv Autopsy. Josh, you are one of the co-artistic directors at Coalition in Richmond, yes?
Correct.
And I've actually been there. It's been a few years ago, but you're still in the same space, right? The storefront?
Yes.
And what I remember, very, very long, narrow stage.
Yeah. So the space is 8 West Broad Street in Richmond, Virginia. It's like, it used to be an art gallery when we first got it.
Okay.
And it was like, because of the placement of the bathroom, we couldn't really set it up in an ideal way. So we have 3 rows of chairs and a super long, narrow stage.
When I first got connected to SAC in Orlando, their space at the time used to be a restaurant, I guess, and it was in a parking garage, and we had a little bit more width, I guess, but it was also a very long, narrow stage with just a little bit extra, a little bit of a backstage kind of a space that was pretty narrow. So I can empathize. I love kind of guerrilla improv taking place wherever. And I remember it being like, it felt, the space felt good when I was there. It was just kind of a narrow stage. And
yeah, it's 70 seats, 3 rows.
That sounds like a tagline to me, if you don't have that on shirts.
We don't, but maybe we should.
So you are co-artistic director. How did you get connected to Coalition?
I was a founding member, so of the theater, not of like the improv group that became the theater. I joined them maybe a year after they started. I went to school in New York, and when I came back, I was doing some improv around town. And there was like this really cool group that I wanted to break in with called the Richmond Comedy Coalition. And I was like, ooh, they're doing the kind of stuff I want to do. And so when they had auditions, I went out and auditioned. And maybe 3 or 4 years later, we ended up opening a theater, and now here we are.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you said you were doing improv, though, a little bit of improv beforehand. Do you remember what your first encounter with improv was?
Yes. I was on a high school improv team.
Nice. What grade were you in when you got connected with that?
I think we started in 11th grade.
Okay.
My theater teacher's a local improviser, Jeff Clevenger, and he was my theater teacher, and he started at the school in 11th grade, and he started an improv team, and here we are. Thanks, Jeff.
And was that in Richmond then?
Yeah, in the suburbs.
Okay. Did they have a name, your high school group?
Bloopers? It was Bloopers, and the O's were the eyes of like those Groucho Marx glasses.
Okay.
On our logo. It's a high school improv team.
Was it the mustache also there, or was it just the glasses?
Yeah, it was like the glasses and the mustache and the nose, like the whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So taking some cues from UCB and some cues from Hooters.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a marriage made in heaven.
Yeah. Honestly, I think I might pivot the Coalition now that you mention it.
Started here, which is great.
Yeah.
After high school, then, how did that continue for you, the improv journey?
I moved to New York for school, and while I was up there, I saw shows at all the theaters up there, and I ended up at the Magnet as one of the interns, so I could take classes and afford classes by interning. And I ended up teching for Trike every Saturday. I don't know if you know Trike, Peter McNerney and Nick Kanellis.
I don't.
Up at the Magnet. They're really good. They're so good.
You teched for them for how long?
Like 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were taking classes there as well?
Yeah.
Did you end up playing there?
A little bit. It was the kind of thing where, like, because of school, I didn't have a ton of time. So, and also I was like really in my head about my own skill level. So I didn't play there as much as I probably could have, but I learned a lot.
That's great. When you moved to New York, if I may ask, what did you go to school for?
Film.
Okay. All right. So in the same family.
Yeah.
What brought you back to Richmond? Just because it was home?
Yeah, and I ran out of money like you do when you're in your early 20s. And I was like, whatever, I'll go back to Richmond. I'll move in with my parents for a while. And that's when I linked up with the coalition.
So let's go back, I guess, to high school for just a minute. You said it was the drama instructor?
Yeah.
Do you remember any of the first classes in improv or the first instruction in improv? Anything in particular about any of those?
A note I gave literally 2 weeks ago was a note that he probably gave all of us in our first rehearsal, which is to like punctuate with physicality. Because it was like a short form team. He was more teaching us how to play the games and relying on our own natural improv talent.
Yeah.
Because in high school, it's really hard to like develop people into competent improvisers. It can be done and it has been done, but he was teaching us like short form and how to play the games. And he was like, yeah, just remember, like punctuate with physicality. If you're doing something and saying something at the same time, it'll be funnier if you say the thing and then do it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. I will steal that as well and use that, I'm sure.
It's solid. Like if you're going to flip the coin, finish your sentence first and then flip it,
Now, you enjoyed improv enough that you pursued it when you went to school up in New York. So what was it that kind of struck your fancy, or was there a moment when you knew things were really resonating with you?
I mean, I think I've just always been a performer and a comedian. I guess, like, if you're talking about, like, my first exposure to improv, it would obviously be, like, as a fifth grader, just watching Who's Line reruns on Comedy Central. You know what I mean? So I've always had that sort of, like, desire to be on stage and to perform and to be funny. By the time I was an adult, I don't think there was ever a part of me that wasn't going to do improv.
Was there anything in particular that drew you to improv versus other avenues of comedy, stand-up or sketch, or do you do those as well?
I do those as well. Here's what I'll say. Doing improv keeps my brain active and in a good spot where doing sketch and stand-up is easier, if that makes sense. So, like, I find that I have a harder time writing if I'm not getting on stage doing improv regularly, just because it keeps your headspace in that, like, playful, silly spot that you want to be in when you're writing.
Yeah. Did you perform in high school, do improv shows?
Yeah, wild. Being on a high school improv team is kind of insane because you're performing in like your big high school auditorium for like 250 people. Like the biggest improv shows you'll ever do, you will do as a 16-year-old.
Well, that's only because they can. I mean, if they could fit that many people in the coalition, I'm sure you'd be selling that many tickets. So it's just you're limited by space.
We've rented out some bigger theaters for some shows in the past, and it is like a really nice feeling. But like in high school, for like every show you do, there's like 250 people there. It's just like a weird baseline to set for yourself.
And this was performing arts space, or was it gymnasium?
It was like a performing arts space, like an auditorium.
Do you have any particular memories of any moments when you were doing those shows as a 16-year-old?
Only the time I ripped my pants on stage. I think is really the part that sticks out at this point.
Tell me that story.
There's 250 people in the audience and you're doing improv and you bend over and your pants rip and your butt comes out. And you're a teenager, so you're mortified. This is me. I'm saying it in the second person to distance myself from the mortification that I felt. Yeah, I think I was in a scene where I was like hiking a turkey like a football into an oven. And when I bent over to do that, my pants ripped.
When in the show was this and how did you recover?
I don't think I've ever recovered. And it was towards the end. I think I had one line game after that.
Okay, so you were able to stand there, not with your back to the audience, so you were facing the audience. Yeah. And no cool nickname became of that?
No, I've already had a cool nickname my whole life. Everyone calls me Blue, so I don't need another nickname on top of it.
So then you're in New York and you're watching Trike. Do you have any memories of any aha moments or anything when were watching those shows when you were teching for them for either things that like, oh, that just really went sideways, or, oh, that's an amazing thing. I need to remember that to apply that?
I think the biggest lessons I took were one about speed, right? Like the pacing of a show. Even now watching them, I saw them at a festival about a month ago. They are so fast it's just two people and there's never a dead stage moment. But it's not like they're doing a mono scene. Like they're doing scene after scene after scene, cutaway after cutaway after cutaway, and they just never slow down. The other thing that, especially as a young improviser, I took away was like, I was in film school at the time. I was like doing acting for film classes as part of that program. And I was like really amazed at like how well they were acting and like feeling actual emotions while they were improvising.
Yeah.
And sort of just tapping into that place where it's like, oh, you're playing like a super real, believable character. And that's why this show is good.
Yeah.
So I think watching them is probably what solidified that sort of play style for me. My friend Bianca Casusul, she and I share this sentiment that we prefer to see, like we prefer when an improv show is bad to feel more like a weird one-act play than like an underwritten sketch show. And that's sort of my like guiding principle. I want our shows to feel like weird one-act plays that are hopefully funny.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's an excellent lesson to learn as well. I had the benefit of improv being the first acting course when I was at Western Michigan University. And so I learned improv initially as theater, not as comedy. So I know that was very formative in my journey. And the comedy is very alluring and seductive. So to be able to focus on, hey, let's do good theater. Let's make this feel like a one-act play versus trying to get to a punchline in a sketch or something like that is, I think it definitely can make all the difference between something that's bearable to watch and something that's cringy.
Yeah, for sure.
So that was Trike, and you said they're very fast. Can you elaborate on that anymore?
I mean, it's just like the speed at which they're making moves that are also still just solid moves. So like when you're watching novice improvisers or even more experienced improvisers, like someone will edit and often there will be like a half second to 2 seconds where there's nothing happening on stage. And even I can be guilty of this all the time, right? Where it's just like people are like, oh, haha, that was a funny scene. And like they take a second to reset in their own minds. There's like nothing like that with Trike. It is a 55-minute show where it just goes the entire time.
And did you ever see anything go awry with them as you were teching? Or did their energy kind of make up for anything that may have otherwise derailed them?
I've seen them edit themselves once or twice early, and I think it's because they felt like they were running out of steam.
Yeah.
Or maybe like in the show, they were like, this feels like we've gone the full time. Or maybe I just didn't catch up on them coming to some sort of resolution that I should have caught on to. But yeah.
What about in your improv? Have you had moments when you're performing when things have gone awry? Anything that sticks out in your mind as a not a great moment?
We will sometimes do like remotes or like corporate shows and stuff.
Sure.
And sometimes the ask there can be like, you know, we're like just focusing on our DEI initiatives and we were hoping you could reflect some of that stuff in your show or something like that. Like asks that are like trying to bring in improvisers to be funny and then also like accomplish some higher level goal can be really difficult. And so like you have this in the back of your mind the whole time and it makes you just be like the weirdest, most stilted show of your life in this like space you're not used to performing in. That was me last night, so it's fresh.
To dovetail into what you were just saying, for me, I feel like when you're told not to do something is worse than when the request is made to do something. That always makes it awkward, but I feel like whenever I've been asked to, like, don't, we shouldn't mention this, or, for instance, this is a random example, not a real one, but yeah, we just had a bunch of layoffs, so if you could not mention anybody getting fired, and it's like, oh, dude, you just planted that seed. Explain to me remote show. I think I know, but I don't want to assume.
Yeah, I guess remote show would just be shorthand for like any sort of thing where the theater is being contracted out to do something, perfect. Right? So it's like it could be a workshop with a show for like team building, or it could be, in this case, doing a show for like a DEI conference for college students.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an interesting time.
Yeah, just in the post-COVID world, I was like, oh, maybe he means remote show as in you were doing it remotely. Not like offsite, but like via a camera.
Yeah, I guess that's also a fair assumption to make. Those are also very hard.
Yes, I would imagine.
For someone who hates a dead stage, like just dealing with the delay that the internet causes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was also the other weird thing was right before we started, we like did short form and then long form. And right before the long form set, the organizers were like, the drag queens that are coming up after you guys are 15 minutes late. Can you make this run longer? Sure. Yeah, we can.
Not a common problem, I would think, for an improv gig. I could be wrong there, though.
Yeah, I feel like that's an uncommon problem. One, to be the appetizer to drag bingo is interesting because it's like, are people just waiting for me to be done so they can go to drag bingo? And also, yeah, it was a fun, interesting time.
So they were the main event?
I think we were technically the keynote, which is also a weird thing to make an improv show. And then I think drag bingo was like the fun thing. So it was like, we're going to make these guys do improv, but it's going to involve all of the hard work you've been talking about doing all week at this conference. And then you get to go have fun at drag bingo. It's a very hard event. Yeah.
Yeah. I know back in the day, a lot of rock stars really loved the Pythons. And so Graham Chapman was brought on board to open for The Who, I think. And he did it once and realized that it was just that was a horrible gig because no one was there to see a comedian. Mm-hmm. They were there to see The Who. So yeah, that's why I wondered if that was the main attraction. But I guess that sounds like it was like a conference. Everyone was sequestered or they had to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those could also be hard gigs.
I did stand up at a music show for my friend's birthday once. Despite, I was like, hey, bud, stand up at music shows never works. And she said, it's my birthday. You have to. And then I did. And I bombed my face off. And not just once, because she wanted me to tell jokes between all the bands. So 4 times I bombed myself off, bombed 5 minutes at a time over the entire night.
A buddy of mine and I were asked to do is a tiny little tent stage, so not very big at all. Like maybe 25 people, I think, could fit in there for Orlando Calling when they brought that concert idea over to Orlando. I think it only happened the 1 year, but they're like, yeah, we'd love to do like improv between sets. And we got there and we realized that what they meant was they wanted cover for when they were changing the instruments and stuff out in this tiny tent. So there was already very little room. And the two of us together attempted something. And then I was quickly like, Greg, you need to do this yourself because this isn't working. And he had more charisma with the crowd. So he kind of took over and just entertained a little bit. I forget what he did. It wasn't really stand up because he didn't have anything prepared. But yeah, that's tough because they're there for the music. Yeah. They don't care what you have to say.
It's like doing music shows, and then if you've ever done like bar prov at a sports bar and there's a TV on behind you.
Yeah.
Like one of the worst shows I've ever done was bar prov at a sports bar, and there was like a huge projector playing a football game right above my head the whole time.
Oh, it was above you? So,
yeah.
Oh.
What's the most stage-like area of a giant sports bar? Directly in front of the TV.
And you can't turn it off because then you just boo or leave.
Yeah, it was like some sort of thing where the guy who ran the troupe I was playing with when I first moved down here before I was with the Coalition was, I think, romantically entangled with the woman that booked the entertainment at this bar. And I was like, we're getting paid for this, so I'm going to do it. But it was awful.
All right, switch gears just a little bit. Were you ever a part of any other named groups? I love improv group names because they're all real ridiculous.
So when I first was with Coalition, I auditioned and I thought I was going to be on the house team they were casting, but they added me to main stage. So that was just Richmond Comedy Coalition main stage. And then their first house team ever was called Karate Practice, which does have a fun story because at the time we were renting a training center above this jewelry store. They were practicing or whatever, and they were warming up. And the lady who owned the jewelry store came upstairs and was just like, why are you guys stopping around and yelling? Is this some kind of karate practice? And that's why they named it the team, which I think is really funny.
Yes.
And then when we opened the theater, the team I was on was called Pigeon. And the team I was coaching was called Dollar Machine.
Any stories around why they were called those things or not as much?
You can cut this story if you think it's too inappropriate. But the reason Pigeon was called Pigeon is because we were having dinner as a team in like a family restaurant. And one of the guys who runs like a local improv troupe in town that wasn't us, he's not with them anymore, posted this absolutely insane Facebook rant about certain pejorative terms. And one of the guys on our team wanted to read that rant to us, but he couldn't say the words he was saying out loud. So he said, every time it says these words, I will just say the word pigeon. And then we named our team that, which is like, it's like code word for some like very disgusting language, which I've always found to be like an iffy reason to name your team that. But it stuck. Dollar Machine, I think, was just inspired by something that happened in one of their early practice scenes before their first show.
I am a fan of naming your team after a moment like that. Any of those, really, the karate practice, pigeon, or even Dollar Machine just coming from something in workshop. I feel like those are, regardless of how silly, more meaningful for the group than just trying to spin a wheel and find a cool name that way. You can do it that way, and you can land on cool things, but I like the stories.
Yeah, I was with a prolific sketch team for a while called Trash Bang. And I don't know how we got that name. I think we signed up for like an open mic and they were like, what's your team name? And we were like, and then it stuck. Like I have no idea.
It's got a nice ring to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely teed up the flavor of those very avant-garde shows.
It's either going to be trash or it's going to be bang.
Correct. No, it's like a garbage explosion. It's like it's in your face. It's loud. It's smelly.
I like a garbage explosion, to be honest. I think that's a good name as well.
We simplified down, you know?
Yeah.
We couldn't get the YouTube channel, though, because there's some guy who does like a Stomp ripoff in California that's called Trash Bang. So we're Trash Bang RVA if you want to check out our stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that the thought process there was, if people can't find Stomp or people see Stomp and they're just trying to type it into Google to describe it, what are they going to type in? Obviously, Trash Bang.
They got the trash. They're banging on it.
It's perfect. It's perfect. Does he also own WeirdIrishDancing.com?
Yeah.
What would be the river dance?
Hotcloggers.net.
That's me. I'm Trash Bang and Hot Cloggers.
Yeah. From what I remember when we looked at his website, he just like takes a bunch of like garbage cans to children's parties and tells them to make music. It's
So it is the laziest thing from start to finish.
Yeah. And he took our YouTube handle, so
yeah, so he deserves all this derision.
Mm-hmm.
He's the clown to which you were referring last night.
Yeah, for sure. That I'm sure very nice man who lives in California and just wants to make music.
Just working his side hustle, trying to make ends meet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, every day I wake up and I'm a janitor, but at night.
Trash Bang, baby. Well, other than Trash Bang, what's the most shocking thing you've seen or done on stage?
Who Wants to Cream Pie Baby New Year's, the sketch that comes to mind there. I know this is an improv podcast, but when you ask me these questions, I'm going to think of individual sketches, and I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Dare I ask what the sketch was about?
It's a New Year's Eve sketch, and it's based on time travel. So the sketch opens with the host of the show. We used to do a show called Suck It, and then the year that just ended.
Okay.
So like, Suck It 2016.
Sure.
And that was like our annual New Year's sketch show. So like the hosts were teeing it up, and then they would like freeze in time. And I would come out in a tracksuit with a sword and a laser gun and be like, I'm from the future. I'm Josh Blubaugh's grandson. The thing he's about to do is his magnum opus. It's the funniest thing he's ever done in his life. And you can't laugh at it. All right. This is the night that he decides to move to LA and try to make it big in comedy. And if you laugh, he's going to do that. But the thing is, he's a reverse Hitler. We got to keep him out of the arts to prevent tragedy. We need him to join the resistance. So you can't laugh at this next thing. This is my grandpa's funniest thing he's ever done. I'm going to start time back up. When he comes out here, don't laugh. And then I go backstage and I rip the tracksuit off. The hosts unfreeze from time, and then they introduce the next sketch, which is Who Wants to Cream Pie Baby New Year. And it's literally just me in a diaper holding two cream pies. going, ooh, who wants to cream pie baby New Year? And it's like very dumb. And the audience throws cream pies at me. And then I go backstage and then time freezes again. And I wipe the whipped cream off my face and I throw on the tracksuit and I come back out. And I'm like, do you not want a future? I'm going to rewind time. And we do it all again. But that's probably one of the most like weird, disgusting things I've done on stage.
Did you do this several New Years in a row, or was it just one New Year?
I did, actually. I did it 2 years in a row because the next year I wasn't even on the sketch team for that show. And they hit me up and they were like, can you just do that one again? Which is great. I'm flattered. But and that year, Dashel, who is on Trash Bang, threw a pie at me so hard my nose bled.
That kind of ruins the verisimilitude of you being then from the future if you have to come back out with your nose bleeding and say.
Luckily, it was through the like during the final pass, so it was fine. But like, I just still remember the smile on his face while he was throwing the pie. Like it was so good.
As he was hiding the brick in the pie before.
Well, I shouldn't have used like the aluminum pie tins. I should have done something different there, but
easier to throw that way than just the graham cracker crust.
It's true.
Can you think of any near misses in terms of things that could have gone sideways but didn't?
Every improv scene ever. It's weird, and like in some ways I feel guilty being on a podcast that's largely about talking about improv in the past and like what you've done, because it's like I'm one of those people that gets off stage and I don't know what happened anymore.
Yeah.
I just like I enter a fugue state and then I get off stage and everyone's like, great show, love the scene where you played a monkey. And I'm like, I played a monkey? Yeah, near misses in improv. Yeah, I don't know if I have any. I'm sorry.
No, I think your answer is great because I think that's part of the allure of it, right? Because things could go wrong at any moment. It's happening live. We're making it up on the spot, and that's part of the mystique.
Yeah. I'll say narrative shows. It's also that feeling is always there because it's like if we do something wrong, we sort of have to commit to that thing for the rest of the show and make it right. And the show I primarily do right now is a narrative show called Fan Friction, which is a fan fiction mashup show where we get like two pieces of media from the audience and we squish them together. Our last show was Severance and Gilmore Girls. So it's the sort of thing where you're balancing two like pieces of media worth of pop culture lore while also trying to put a good improv show together.
Yeah.
And so I definitely feel like there's been moments in those shows where it's just like, how did we get here? We're so far from either suggestion right now. We're just on our own little planet.
I would think with Severance, you'd have at least you can just always take the elevator, right?
Yeah. Well, is the thing about like the Gilmore Girls is innie and outies and like what they were up to. That was the whole premise. Yeah.
I mean, you should pitch that probably to CW. I think they might jump on that.
I should. Z had a really funny bit where he was worried that his innie was lame. And so he was like, I think he brought like a Percy Jackson book to work to see if the innie would read it and like it. and they did. And he was like, oh, they're so lame.
Do you remember the first time that you really clicked with your scene partner or scene partners?
Shout out to Steve Howes, my favorite scene partner of all time. Steve's great. He was the first person I ever did a duo with, and we also wrote a lot of great sketches together. But yeah, I feel like that was the first time. Because like when you go into improv super young and you're like 18 in all of these spaces where everyone else is like 22 plus, like in the adult improv world, one, everyone's always calling you the baby. And two, you're not like necessarily mature enough to be in those situations where you like click in with someone and you're on the same wavelength because everyone's like older than you and they actually get it a little more than you do. So I think I grew up a little. I met Steve, and like Steve is very much on the same wavelength as me. So like doing improv with someone that like gets me for the first time, and yeah, it's magical. I miss him all the time. Sometimes when he'll come down for Second Best Fest, and we'll like sneak a little College for Bears set in somewhere. But yeah.
And tell me about the festival and College for Bears.
I'll start with College for Bears. That's just Steve and I's duo.
Okay.
I guess I have to give you that team name story because you seem to like those. We originally called ourselves Dijonnaise, me being the mayonnaise, him being the mustard. Then our tagline was, it's like College for Bears. Very 2010. And then we just changed the name to College for Bears.
Okay. I like Dijonnaise. It sounds like an 80s band of some kind.
Yeah. I was really into this silly little web series at the time that was like, I just remember the tagline for it was Community College DX. It was like this animated YouTube series. And I think that's probably why College for Bears happened.
Nice.
Yeah. Anyway, Second Best Fest.
Yeah.
So Second Best Comedy Fest. It's our 10th year, 8th festival, thanks COVID, this year. And yeah, it's super fun. It's a super cool time. When we founded the festival, there was a lot of fests on the East Coast that were just like, we're the best improv festival in the South, the best on the East Coast, the best, the best, the best. And we were like, cool. We're Second Best Fest. And it's been really interesting being involved with running the festival now that I'm co-artistic directors with Kim, because prior to COVID, I really wasn't involved with this festival at all. So it's been a lot of like learning. There was sort of like a leadership changeover post-COVID. So it's definitely been a learning experience. This is my third one that we're doing so far. We're still trying really hard to focus on the mission of the performers who come to our festival having a really cool, fun time.
Yeah.
And then also there's good shows on top of that. But like our philosophy is, if it's like the festival all the performers want to do because it's such a cool, fun time, then we'll have the best performers wanting to come to our festival.
Well, then you'll have to change the name.
Hey, we're second best, okay? We commit to the idea that like we are giving you quality. I'm sorry we're not the Del Close Marathon. Which, are they the best? That's debatable. That's really just volume over quality, and it's fun. I recommend going at least once. But yeah, so it's like for us, it's more like, oh, we need to have like cool after parties. We need to have cool experiences, cool workshops, looking at like headliners who are like up and comers who are about to pop off instead of trying to find those people that are like already famous so that performers can leave going like, oh, I met her at Second Best Fest. That sort of stuff.
Yeah. And you said comedy festival, right? So it's stand-up, sketch, and improv?
Correct. Yeah. We don't get as many sketch submissions as I would like, but I also know from experience traveling with sketch is a bear. But yeah, we stand-up, sketch, and improv.
Why do you think, I'm not disagreeing with you, but why do you think traveling with sketch is a bear?
I think there's ways to make it not a bear, but every sketch team really wants to have a lot of tech cues, myself included. So it's like some sketch teams will show up and be like, hey, this is our QLab file. It's like, we don't have QLab. We have a really old whiteboard. I'm sorry. It's like, we have a 5-minute video in the middle of our 25-minute set. Why are you doing that? Like, I'm a personally controversial opinion. Sketch teams, when they make videos, will often premiere them at their live shows. I think that distracts from the fact that they're at a live show and that they should just push people to their YouTube at the end of the show. Because it's like, if I pay a ticket, right? If I pay $10, $12, $15 to see a show, I'm not going to like come in and be like, oh, thank God I have this thing you shot on your iPhone I can watch.
This thing I could have watched from home tomorrow, you're going to show me now. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking maybe it was because sketch is a lot of times so regional. Like the Second City Main Stage show is very Chicago. And there are sketches that will travel very well, but the show as a whole probably plays best in Chicago.
I didn't even think about the regionality of it. Yeah, you're probably right. I think the tech is the hardest part of traveling, but maybe my jokes don't translate other places. Who knows?
Well, no, I think that's great. Yeah, and you're definitely right. That would definitely be a bear. And I can only say that it's too bad there's not a college for bears.
I always wanted to do a touring 2-person sketch show with Steve. If you're out there listening to this, baby, hit me up. We can write it from New York and Richmond and then take it out together.
What would you say, if anything comes to mind, is the hardest fail you've either experienced or witnessed?
Oh, I was talking about this the other night, but in 2016, we did this live late night show, and we did a live election special in 2016. And it just, throughout the night, became obvious who was going to win, and everyone's mood just like went to the shitter. It was like literally, it's just like this infamous night that started with like fun jokes, but we're all nervous, and like very quickly devolved into people just leaving the theater and going home without like unceremoniously, because it was supposed to be like a show and a party. It was awful.
I'm imagining like the performers on stage, the last person has left, and then the one single streamer falling from the ceiling into the dead silence of the space.
Yeah, it was. Ugh.
Yeah, my follow-up there is, what do you think went wrong? But I think the answer is everything.
Yeah.
Not with you, but the world.
I had written this sketch very early in the show that tanked so hard because the premise was that we had this girl on our team, Katie. She played Trump in all of our sketches that had him. And the first sketch she appeared in that night was Trump acting like he had already won and was like calling the election at like 7:00 at night on the East Coast. And it was like, when we were writing, he was like, yeah, this is funny. Like, he thinks he can just say he's the winner. This is very Trump. And then the night of, it's just like, no, that's probably going to happen, actually. That's how Bush won, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Name it and claim it.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a scene or a show where you just weren't on the same page as the rest of your group?
Yes. The answer is absolutely yes. Do I know which one it was? No. It's an interesting challenge. Anytime you're thrown into like sort of like an all-star set,
yeah, sure,
at a festival or even like at your own theater, right? Where it's just like, oh, like we have a bunch of people and we have this show and like we have this time slot we need to fill. Let's like throw some people up there with no practice beforehand. It's like you'll find yourself in these situations where it's just like, are we even from the same theater? Like, did we take the same classes? What's happening?
Yeah. Well, in a lot of ways, it's the opposite of what you were saying about when you perform and when you're writing with Steve, right? Where he really gets you. If you're suddenly thrown into a group of people that don't necessarily all get each other, even if you're doing improv in the same place, it's not helpful.
Yeah. And then like people get nervous and they feel weird and they start doing a lot of walk-ons, and that's like the worst improv show you've ever seen. And that always happens if you do a montage and auditions as well. Like if I do 3 audition slots with montages, one of them will have a montage that's nothing but like walk on and Canadian cross after walk on. Like it's so bad. And it's like, just let a scene breathe, let it have its time. They had just said something interesting that was going to be so good, and then you came out carrying bowling balls, and I don't know why you're here.
Yeah. Auditions are weird though, right? You got to give a little, I'm terrible at auditions. Mm-hmm. So I guess it's just, if I ever audition for you, you got to give me a little, give me a little grace.
Yeah, I won't.
Because there's a lot of pressure.
I'm probably the most ruthless person on the audition panel consistently. The advice I give to anyone auditioning for an improv team is like, show them your range. Show them you can be silly. Show them you can be silly in a different way, and then show them you can play the straight man. And if you can get those 3 scenes out of the way, you'll be fine. Beyond that, don't do anything that makes you look bad, like a million walk-ons.
Yeah. Especially if it's just you doing the million walk-ons. Yeah, that would be extra.
Yeah.
So being co-artistic director, you still play at Coalition, right?
I do, but it's hard. I can't like audition for myself for house teams and stuff like that. So I have to find my own little spots. That
was kind of going to be where I was going with that, was how has that changed how you play? And I've talked to a few other people that have run their own theaters or been a part of the sort of administration of theaters, and just how the dynamic changes with people, because they're not just playing with a fellow player, they're playing with the boss or someone who has power, and it just changes the dynamic.
I definitely don't get asked to do indie teams and stuff like that anymore. It used to be, before I was AD, people would always be like, oh, hey, we're like doing the lab later. Do you want to like get up there with us and like just jerk around for 15 minutes? Like, yeah, absolutely. Now it's like none of that ever happens. No one invites me to anything that's like, it's like, I think there's an intimidation factor there, or like maybe they think I'm too busy. Maybe I'm just a weird guy and they don't want me around. Who knows? But yeah, that part of my interaction with the theater is 100% gone away, is the like organic team forming sort of stuff.
you're still able to navigate and find a spot where you're able to have that creative outlet as well, you said?
Yeah, because I control the calendar. Yeah, so there's a D&D improv show I've been with for 10 years now called Roll For. It's always like Roll For and then whatever the theme is, like roll for blast off, roll for brunch, whatever. And so I've been doing that show for 10 years. So that is still a monthly show, which is nice. And then there's Fan Friction, and those are really my two shows that I do. And then occasionally, if it's impossible to fill a spot, there's two teams I can perform with. There's Twins, which is just Kimberly, the co-artistic director, and I, or the Placeholders, which is a crack squad of improvisers who held down a house team slot for 2 months right after we first opened while we were waiting for like more students to come through the program. Like when we reopened after COVID, we auditioned teams. We really wanted to cast 4 teams. And we got 3 very solid teams. So then the Placeholders were formed to fill out that 4th slot. And it was just like me directly asking people to be like, this is like maybe a 3-4 month commitment, and then we'll have another team because more people will be through classes. And like I can call up those guys and maybe get them to do a show as well.
3 or 4 month commitment, and it's how many years later, and you still call them every now and again?
Yeah, it's like, you guys want to get the old band back together. One last job. That college team we had booked opening for that show bailed on us. And then we do an absolutely unhinged mono scene, and it's fine.
I'd ask about the story of the name, but I think I can guess.
Yeah, the Placeholders.
Yeah. It's a good name.
Kim and I are called twins because I'm 6'4" and she's 5 foot something. It's actually twins, and then parentheses 1988, which is the year the movie Twins came out.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's the story there.
Does she have to do a Danny DeVito impression the entire time?
No, but she will.
Good. It's good. It's a selling point. I like it.
Yeah.
How is watching improv for you now? You watched a lot of shows when you were teching, obviously, for Trike, and now you're one of the ADs at Coalition, so I imagine you see a lot of shows. Has that experience changed at all for you?
Yes. I don't want to say I'm like burnt out on improv, but like as you do more improv, watching it gets less and less fun, at least for me. Unless a team like really like clicks in and like enters whatever like weird Super Saiyan state they're capable of entering, and I know they can do, and then I'm just like locked in the whole time. But yeah, it's like if I'm watching a show and a team's having a rough time, it's I think even harder for me than it is for the average audience member.
Yeah. I compared it a little bit to any like visual art, painting, for example. I imagine if you're, a master painter, that you see a lot more of the mistakes of other painters when you look at the painting, just because of your knowledge base, versus me looking at a painting being like, yeah, it looks like a horse, or whatever.
It's also hard when you're artistic director because your inclination is to be like, well, I'm in charge. I want to go give that team notes. But like you put a coach above them, and like you have to trust your coach to notice the things you also noticed. And then you watch their sets again and again. And if it's a pattern, you have a conversation with the coach. But you can't just directly address these things like you might if you were just coaching the team.
Yeah. So much protocol and so many feelings you have to be aware of.
Yeah. And it's also like the moment you start backseat coaching teams, it's like, woof. No one wants to be around that.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to switch gears now a little bit. I have sort of a Prussian questionnaire or behind the actor studio questions for you, improv related or performance related.
Okay.
Josh, how do you get into the proper headspace to play?
I need 2 or 3 kinds of warm-ups. The first one is like a focus warm-up because I'm very attention deficit and I need to focus. So like a pass the clap, a zip zap zap, those ones that we all hate doing and we don't realize they're doing something for us, but they do.
Right.
I like a matching warm-up. It gets me into like a silly headspace. So like a pass the face, a follow the follower. And then I usually need something that like forces me to like idea generate. So like a 5 things or a categories or even like a rap one. Just something that's like forcing my brain to think of things on the fly. And those 3 things put together will put me in a good headspace for a show.
Awesome. So you don't find necessarily that you need any sort of energy builder?
Not really. I can be as low or high energy as I need to be. I'll also say that when I was younger, I used to go in the back alleyway and skip up and down the alleyway to get my energy up. And I don't do that anymore now that I'm 34. I think like my energy level is just going to be wherever I can put it. And if I do like an energy warm up, it won't necessarily affect the energy I bring to a show.
Sure.
But that's me personally. My team usually needs one, so we do that too.
What is your favorite get for?
Kim and I have been doing this one for twins for a while now, which is what is a secret you know about someone who's not in this room?
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And then it's like a little interviewee thing. The last one we got was wild. We always get something wild. We rarely get something that sucks. But the last one we got was I found out last week that my dad has a secret family.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that almost like derailed the whole show. I was like, I could spend an hour talking to this person and have a good set.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like her dad immigrated here on a green card, and apparently his ex from wherever he immigrated from also immigrated here on a green card, and they secretly had a family together.
That's great fodder.
Yeah. And then Kim and I both initiated the set pregnant. We do a mono scene, and so we were both pregnant with secret families in the mono scene. And then because we both wanted to explore how you navigate having a secret family as a woman, because you have to get pregnant to have kids. Yeah.
What is your least favorite suggestion?
To receive?
Yes.
Food, obvious, like most food. Some food has a little stink on it. I could probably do a good spaghetti scene, but like most food is pretty boring. Most animals are pretty boring. I love a suggestion that can have like multiple meanings to it. So you can be like, ooh, you thought when they said pumping, they were pumping iron, but I just had a baby. I play pregnant a lot.
When you get some of those or worse, do you have a way that you like to burn suggestions, or maybe even in a get?
If someone yells out something that's like, I know it's going to be a bad show, like if someone's just like, talk about Trump or like whatever it is, while getting the suggestion, I'll just go, ugh, what's something else?
I love it.
With fan friction, what's nice is I can be like, who here has seen that? And like no one in the audience raises like bone tomahawk. Who here seen bone tomahawk? No? Great. Let's do something else.
That leads into the next question, possibly. Describe your onstage persona. How is onstage Josh different than offstage Josh? And does it vary depending on who you're playing with?
That line is so blurred these days. I feel like there used to be an on and off stage persona when I was younger, but now it's just all me. And I think stand-up did that to me.
Okay.
But like I'm sillier now in my real life than I've probably ever been. The other day, one of my coworkers described me as juvenile. And I was like, what do you mean? I said it exactly. I was like, juvenile, what do you mean? That stupid voice and everything. And she like meant it in like a nice way. But obviously it's stuck in my head for weeks now. Yeah, I think I am a sad person. And when I'm silly, I'm not sad. So I'm just silly all the time now.
Being co-AD at Coalition, is that your vocation or is this a side thing?
It is a part-time job.
Okay.
One, the theater's a nonprofit. We don't have a ton of money to pay people. And also the amount of work that goes into running the theater is probably more than a part-time job's worth of work. When they were looking for artistic directors, they were looking for a singular person at a rate that was like fine, but I already had a full-time job that I wasn't going to leave, and Kim already had a full-time job she wasn't going to leave. And we were getting coffee, and it was like, oh, the board asked me to apply. Oh, the board asked me to apply. And we were like, what if we applied together? And that's how this whole thing started. And now we split it 50-50, but it feels more like 75-75. And so the theater's definitely making out like a bandit there.
Well, the reason I was asking is I wondered if having that so much part of your life allowed sort of that blur between onstage persona and not, because you didn't have to switch gears as much. Do you find then in your full-time job you have more of a persona?
I do. So in my full-time job, I work in medical simulation. I train standardized patients who are actors who pretend to be sick people so that medical medical and nursing students can practice with real people. So I work with a lot of improvisers and a lot of actors because those are the people who become standardized patients. So I just bring my director persona everywhere, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Harder to be silly, though, when you're pretending to be sick?
Sure, when you are playing like a bipolar depression case for 40 minutes, that is hard and you're not very silly then. But those 10 minutes when you're not playing sad and you're hanging out with your friends, that's when you get it all out.
That's awesome. What inspires you on stage?
I'm genuinely an uninspired person. I get really excited when the show takes a weird turn to a place where it's not funny anymore, but it's genuinely interesting for a little bit.
Okay.
Like, I'm very okay with a show where it's just like, oh, things just got really heavy, and then someone's going to make a joke and we're going to get out of this scene. But, like, the scene's interesting. The scene is good. Yeah. This husband and wife breaking up right now, give me all the tea about what's happening with them. The audience will still laugh just because it's like visceral, real emotions.
Yeah.
That really clicks me in. I'm like, ooh, love this.
Yeah, that makes sense thinking back about what you were saying in terms of, if it's going to go south, it's better to feel like a one-act play than unfinished sketch.
Yeah.
That all scans. Is there anything that shuts you down or takes you out of it when you're on stage?
Being interrupted. If someone interrupts me during I know it's improv, it's going to happen, right? But it's like, if I'm conveying an idea, trust that I can convey the idea. Like, there's sometimes where like emotionally it makes sense to interrupt someone, right? But like, I hate when I'm like mid-sentence and I get like some crappy walk-on, or like my scene partner is just like, well, actually my idea, or like whatever it is, I just want to like build something together. And so like when that agency is taken away, I really check out.
That explains what your feelings on the walk-ons. How do you navigate, or are you able to separate your AD self from performance self when you're on stage, does any of that, are you tempted to be pulled out by any of that stuff?
Sorry if you can hear those sirens outside my window. It's fugue state again, right?
Yeah.
I get up there, I'm 100% focused on the show. I'm not really thinking about any AD stuff. I can't really like hold anything anyone does against them on stage when I'm also up there from like an AD perspective, or like, I complete separation somehow.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
In your estimation, what makes a good scene partner?
The same things that make you a good improviser, right? So like listening, reacting, not thinking about what you're going to say next, but instead like listening to your scene partner and being like, ooh, you're doing stuff. I have a perspective. Yeah. The person who's not thinking is the best scene partner and improviser, in my opinion.
I love that. Another t-shirt. Is there any advice that you would give to your younger self?
Yeah. Don't take things as seriously. You're talented enough that you don't have to fight for things. And don't take it personally when people don't think you're funny. I think those are the two things young Josh Blubaugh needed that he did not understand. He had a lot of emotions.
Yeah, it's hey, we want to be vulnerable on stage, so it's easy to get caught up in that and just be emotional people in general. We're theater people.
Yeah. Just thinking about like my own visceral, angry reaction when this girl who was dating a stand-up I didn't think was funny told me she thought her boyfriend was funnier than me. Like, of course she thinks that, one. But I was just like, no, you're wrong. Like, I got so mad. It's just like, wow, I was in a place.
Do you have a favorite type of character to play?
I love playing against type. I find that every time I do a workshop, teachers will often like preload this note for me because I see like, oh, this guy's 6'4", this is a big dude. I'm going to tell him to play small. I love being like the lowest status, grossest little goblin. I hate playing humans. I want to be just like a little gross guy. I also I love playing like a scientist, or my wheelhouse is like giant man who's a sniveling little weakling.
Or pregnant.
Love to be pregnant. If only one day.
If you could do a scene with anyone living, who would it be?
I'm oddly a really big fan of Mark Evan Jackson. I think it'd be fun to do a scene with him. I think it would be a good scene.
Pardon my ignorance, but who is Mark Evan Jackson?
No, you're good, right? Like he's such an oddly specific poll, and I'm so sorry. Mark Evan Jackson, he was on The Good Place. He's like that ginger guy who played one of the devils, like one of the higher up demons from hell on The Good Place.
Okay.
He was in the Thrilling Adventure Hour. He played Sparks Nevada, Marshall on Mars, which is like where I learned about him, which is a brilliant podcast if you've never listened to it. But yeah, that's my highly specific poll of someone I would like to do a scene with.
Well, if you could do a scene then with anyone who is no longer living in the pantheon of people who have gone before, who would it be?
Oh boy, there's too many possible comedy answers for me to pick just one. I'm both trying to give you a sincere answer, and also my brain just keeps throwing things out like Caligula. Yeah, who's like an actual person that would be interesting to do improv with? I'm sorry. I was like, John Wilkes Booth was probably good at improv. Was like a thought I just had. I need to just throw that out there now so I can get it out of my mind.
John Wilkes Booth and Caligula, the first two answers.
I know. My brain is I'm trying to think of an actual answer. But this ADD part of my brain is just like say horrible monsters.
Jack, anyone named Jack the Ripper, anyone named Jack?
Yeah. I mean, obviously Robin Williams would be kind of an insane energy to do improv with, especially in the early days.
Yeah.
Maybe he would be too overwhelming and I would hate it. It would have to be someone who's like a prolific, good listener, probably the Buddha. No idea. It's so hard to pick a historical figure to do improv with.
Yeah. Well, okay, how about this then? If you could do a scene with anyone fictional, who would it be?
My first thought was just like Ron Weasley, which I don't know why I thought that.
There seems to be a ginger theme.
Yeah, I love improvising with gingers. Tobias Funke. I want to do improv with Tobias from Arrested Development.
Yes. Yes.
Because I know he would like give 110%, but he'd be terrible the whole time. And I would love it.
Yeah.
Like full commitment, but he's just like, I've got a gun and another gun. Like he's just, yeah, I think that would be fun.
And he would be done up as a blue man the entire time as well.
Yeah.
I do think it's telling that when you were thinking historical, your brain went dark, but you didn't say Snape or Voldemort for fictional. You went with Ron Weasley.
Honestly, my first thought was Harry Potter.
Yeah.
For whatever, I don't even like Harry Potter. I never have. I didn't read the books as a kid, but you were like fictional character, and I was like Harry Potter. I was like, why would that be fun? I don't. Yeah.
I think you're very well balanced anyway, because you went dark for dead, but you went good guy for fictional. So, you know, that's got to count for something.
Thank you. Yeah. I've got the yin and yang, and I'm going to bring them together to have that hypothetical improv troupe with John Wilkes Booth and Harry Potter.
I would pay to see that.
Yeah.
I know you said you ran tech for Trike, and I don't know how much tech you use at Coalition, so this might not be a great question, but what do you think is the most helpful from the booth?
We just bought a big timer. That's super helpful. Like it's a big timer and you can see how long you've been on stage.
Yes, that is helpful.
Yeah. If you don't play walk-on music, that's awful. If the host like yells your team name and then silence, are you kidding me? Play that same walk-on music when you black out the set. Bookend it.
Yeah.
Like hit blackout and turn up the volume at the same time. You'd think this would be, there's some techs who don't do these things. You know, it's just like bring the amount of showmanship you would if you were on stage to being a tech, right? If they need you to do some sort of like, welcome to the Coalition, like put on a little voice and do it. Yeah.
Is there anything that you would say was unhelpful from the booth?
I had a tech after announcing the show forget to turn their mic off. And then you could just hear them laughing over the speakers the entire show, but like at weird and opportune times. And there were always like little half laughs, like, hoo-hoo! That was bizarre. And then I as a younger teching a really bad set, couldn't find a high laugh to black it out on because there were no laughs. And so I probably let them drown in their own mediocrity much longer than I should have. So that's a thing you could do wrong.
They're going to dig themselves out of this hole.
Just say one funny thing. Just say one funny thing and I can hit the blackout button.
Somebody go find Trash Bang and get him out there.
God.
Other than laughter, what audience sound do you revel in?
Gasp. Like the Love it.
Yeah.
Ooh, love that. Every once in a while, I'll make a move and I'll just hear the audience go, "Oh no!" Like, I love that one too, where it's like I just do something like so weird and out of left field that the audience is just like, "Ah!" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's feel the whole gambit of emotions."
I think the sets where the audience goes on that roller coaster are definitely more memorable and more enjoyable for the audience because there's peaks and valleys. You can't sustain the hysterical laughter that entire time. So let's take them on a ride.
Yeah, I love to take a moment in a set in which a horror beyond imagination enters the scene, and I invite the audience to try to imagine it with me.
Can you give an example?
Fan Friction did a show that was a mashup of Fear Factor and Love is Blind. And so it was like half of the pods were real, like normal people, and the other half of the pod, like the people they were all talking to, were things you were supposed to be afraid of. So some of the things were like, I've got a gland problem. I'm really sweaty. And so it's just like describing how sweaty you are more and more throughout the entire show. It's like the tentacle monster who's covered in mouths and just finding like fun new ways to like play around with that idea where it's like you shake hands. It's like, did you lick me? That whole like thing. I love like those like gross, weird details around bizarre circumstances. I also love to die. If you put me in space, I will die every time. I love to float dead in space. That's a thing I do too much.
So really, that could be a character then that you like to play too, is the space corpse.
Yeah, dead body in space. It's like I'll get a crack in my helmet, or maybe some sort of alien will sneak its way into my suit, and then I'll just float for the rest of the scene until the edit. Yeah.
We may have touched on this a little bit already toward the front, but what is the worst venue you've played in?
The room I performed in last night for that remote, I've actually done 2 other shows there, and it's like a comedy death trap. I did a charity stand-up show there once that no one got a laugh the entire time. It's like any like giant room that normally wouldn't have comedy in it can be really bad. Yeah, improv-wise, like improv in a bar is a nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, for all the reasons that people could imagine, distractions, people eating or drinking, clinking, lots of things going on. The other space, is it just because it's so giant, you think? Or, I mean, is it cursed? Or is it...
It might be cursed. It might be the size. It might be that every single time I've done comedy there, there's always someone coming on stage going like, we have a really special treat for you tonight. We have this comedy show, and we're really lucky to have it here. And don't forget that this is raising money for child brain cancer. Here's a 13-minute video of kids that had cancer that this charity has helped, and there's going to be a lot of photos of surgeries, and then it's like, now welcome to the stage.
But I mean, if you're good tech, you're playing that video after you black out as well, right, to bookend it?
Yeah, to bookend it. Good set, and here's the surgery photos again.
Here's the second half of the ill children video.
Yeah, you get to find out what happened to Billy. Oh, that's dark. I'm sorry.
It's just a tombstone. Thank you. Come again. Yeah. You may have said this as well, but what the best note or the best words of wisdom you've received?
I don't know. It's one of those things where I probably think about it all the time, but now that you asked, I'm never going to remember.
You teach, I presume.
Yeah, occasionally, yeah.
Is there a note that you give often or an axiom that you give often?
Probably like look into each other's eyes. And also, like, side coaching, I'll just be like, this scene is not about the thing you are doing.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, this scene's not about bowling. Stop talking about bowling. I'm sure I just taught advanced scene study, and I'm sure my students would have something that I said too much that they could tell you. But
I think bowling is good, though. That is correct.
Yeah.
Is there any note that you've been given or any advice that you would say was unhelpful, or can you conceive of the least helpful note?
I always hate the one that's like, yeah, but what were your names? Huh? What names were your characters? Huh? That was a bad scene because I didn't know you were Richard and Margaret. That has always driven me insane. That like the only thing that makes a good improv scene is naming characters.
Yeah.
I also have sort of the hot take that the audience can be the straight man. So like we can have two absurd characters and like that's fine. And some people really hate that. And they're like, why weren't you just being like a normal person in that scene? Because like that person was already weird and you were weird in like a similar way. And I was like, oh, because we could just get weirder and weirder and the audience already knows that they're normal people.
I would throw that in some good words of, some words of wisdom. I like that.
That the audience can be the straight man too.
Yeah. I think why abandon the fun to make sure that there's a straight man on stage?
Yeah. Is the scene always better by having one person just going, oh, what?
Only if they're also talking about bowling.
Yeah. Bowling? That's so weird.
If there were an Academy Awards for everything improv, what would you be nominated for?
Most? That's it. Most.
I love it. I had a friend say the guy who was there.
The guy who was there.
So I like most.
Yeah, no, I think most is probably good. I'm sure my wife has a better joke answer than I do for this because she watches me and I just have to experience being me. I would say most likely to hurt his own voice. I will push my vocal cords to the absolute limit. That's not an Academy Award. That's more of a superlative.
Yeah, well, same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to go with Lifetime Achievement Award in memoriam.
And cut to the image of you floating in space.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a montage of me wearing different spacesuits floating in space just every time I've died in space.
If you were remembered 100 years from now for something improv related, what would you want it to be?
I should have joined the resistance. It's a Baby New Year callback. I'm sorry. Yeah, I would love for 100 years from now for there to be one of those stories that's just like, oh, he had that one scene. Do you remember that? You know, it's like, oh, I saw you do a show and you did this one thing that you don't remember doing. Yeah. Like I wanted to still be that kind of story.
It imprinted itself on the minds of everyone there despite you being in your fugue state and having no memory.
You were some kind of frog man and I loved it.
You did the most amazing frog work I'd ever seen.
Yeah, it's like, you're a frog man, but you still had real feelings. Like, yeah, that's my whole thing.
People keep saying this to me. I don't remember ever being a frog.
Yeah.
Josh, thank you so much for taking the risk to join me on this podcast. Is there anything other than the theater that we can plug for you?
Plug submissions for Second Best Fest being through the end of March.
Okay.
If you want to come to Richmond and hang out with me. Yeah. Anything else I would plug? I don't know. Come to the Coalition Theater.
Yeah.
Come to Richmond. We're a very cool town. I get kind of a big head about how good our improvisers are at the Coalition. I think you will be pleasantly surprised by how funny and quick and good my improvisers are at the Coalition. They're all so good, and I'm so proud of all of them. Come visit.
And I can plug as well. My wife and I had a great time when we went, and Richmond as well. Great city, lots of stuff happening, very vibrant. Great place to go and check out for sure.
Yeah. And also check out Trash Bang RVA on YouTube. I know we haven't uploaded anything in 5 years, but those videos are good.
And also maybe, just check out trashbang.com, that guy, because he could use some clicks.
If you're in California and you have a musically minded child and you want to expose them to trash cans, give that guy a call.
Best plug ever. That does it for Josh Blubaugh's Improv Autopsy. You can find the Coalition Theater at rvacomedy.com. If you have any questions, suggestions, or comments, you can contact me via improvbrain@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, leave a review wherever you're listening. If you don't enjoy the show, why waste your time, right? Check the show notes for links, and as always, thanks for listening to Improv Autopsy.